Our seventh ranked Week 17 matchup has two of the most exciting quarterbacks in the league, but it also has two of the potential best defenses in the league. So, what does that mean for best ball? Stay tuned. Welcome to Summer School Club Fantasy's Best Ball podcast, streaming exclusively on YouTube. I am your host, Austin Amandolia. Here with me, as always, is Matt Record. This is a CRAM session focused on a single Week 17 matchup. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you can see coverage of every single one of these matchups we're breaking down. All 32 teams will be broken down by the time we're done with it, so you need to be checking these out. As I mentioned, we're discussing our seventh ranked game, which is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Houston Texans. Our basic stats and betting lines for this matchup. It is a 46.5 point over under, which ranks fourth out of all 16 Week 17 games. Baltimore are minus 1.5 point road favorites for this one, which I think is incredibly fascinating. These teams also have a pretty solid playoff schedule for basketball tournaments. Their combined weeks 15 and 16 totals are at 183.0, which ranks 7th out of 16. The ADP of the first player coming off of the board in this matchup is none other than Nico Collins towards the end of the second round. This is an indoor matchup in Houston, but it is on Christmas. This game happens 4 days after both of these teams play a different game, so that's something to consider for this matchup. And we ranked it a 6.1 out of 10. We are finally north of 6 points with these rankings, but let's talk about how this matchup goes well. Matt, tell the story. How does this matchup hit its ceiling?
Yeah, I think this matchup hits its ceiling. That both teams are still, in the playoff race, and everyone's healthy. You mentioned that the defenses on these teams are up there, definitely in the upper echelon of team defenses, which is interesting to me. But if CJ Stroud takes the leap that we all think he might be able to, which building off a really great rookie year, his bevy of pass catchers he has there, he's just slinging it around. And then Lamar Jackson stays healthy. Mark Andrews stays healthy. I mean, a lot of this is predicated on health. But you could end up seeing this, high-scoring game that Vegas seems to think that we might get.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a pathway for that to happen. I think, too, you have both of these offenses will be in the second year of their current system. You have the Houston Texans. They had a whole overhaul of their offensive staff happen last year, of their entire coaching staff last year. You have the second year with Todd Monken in Baltimore. So the hope is that these offenses take a step forward and are able to navigate even some of the toughest defenses in the league and get us a shootout that gets tons of points, maybe a bunch of rushing upside from Lamar Jackson on one side, a Mark Andrews touchdown, and bring it back with some of those stout Houston receivers. But there is a potential downside of this matchup, which is why it is only ranked 7th, given the power and the status of those offenses. What is the downside of this matchup? How could it go poorly?
I mean, even just taking player health aside, just the fact that it's a short week, Thursday night games forever have given us some weird results, right? So throwing in essentially a Thursday night game here with 4 days after being played on Christmas, just weird things happen. Like maybe people are tired. Maybe someone who would have played if they had an entire week full of rest doesn't play because 4 days is not enough for them to get there. So I think that is probably the thing I'm most scared of to make this matchup go poorly, because I trust both of these offenses otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because also at this point in the season, we're at week 17. It could be at a point in the season where a win doesn't do anything for these teams. Maybe it doesn't actually change their playoff seeding or ensure them a divisional win. Maybe that happens in week 18. Maybe it's already done by this point, depending on how these teams roll. So I do think there is a possibility that even if there aren't players necessarily sitting the entire time, that they're on a snap counter in this matchup, because both of these teams have the potential to make a run for it and play all the way through to the Super Bowl. So they have their vision on more long-term success and will need to manage their players accordingly. So that said, we have plenty of stacks and correlations that we want to target in this matchup. Matt, what are your favorite stacks and correlations?
Yeah, what's nice when you have really good quarterbacks is there are a lot of good stacks that can happen here. So the one I'll mention, I really like the CJ Stroud Dalton Schultz stack. Now hear me out. Dalton Schultz, a lot of people don't think he's that great, and he might not be. However, CJ Stroud, you can get him as QB6. That's really good value for what his potential could be. And I'm not taking Dalton Schultz as my first tight end, right? But going off the board as tight end 14, kind of get we like to call them these free stacks that aren't really crazy expensive to get, but then you just have them. So I expect the Texans to be moving the ball a lot this year. Someone's going to score a bunch of touchdowns. And there was an established relationship between Stroud and Smith last year, so I think they're going to build on.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that. I love the Dalton Schultz stack. I've definitely been getting my fair share of Dalton Schultz in lineups so far. I think that's a great one. On the Baltimore side, I mean, I love just going with the classic Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews. But we also just talked about on our tight ends show that it seems like both tight ends are going to be viable options. They're going to be on the field a lot at least. So I also, if you miss out on Mark Andrews because him and Lamar are pretty close in ADP, you can get Isaiah Likely later. And then I love coming back with pretty much any of the pass catchers on the Houston side of the ball. I love Tank Dell. I love the value you're getting on him. I'm a big fan of Stephon Diggs this year. I think he is going undervalued because of the season he had in Buffalo last year. But I think he's got plenty of upside. I also there's so honestly so many players in this lineup, in this matchup that I love. The good thing is we have plenty of different ways to talk about them. And I am looking forward to that. So let's get into some more of the ways we can talk about these players. Let's talk about best value at ADP. Matt, who do you think best value at ADP is in this match?
Yeah, you just talked about him. Tank Dell, wide receiver 25. I mean, I'll even say Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 23. Foreshadowing, the biggest trap. Yeah, not every one of these wide receivers is going to do it, right? In terms of season long, stability, because there are so many weapons for Stroud to throw to. But getting one of those at a wide receiver, wide receiver 23 or 25, who could very easily have a top 15 season. That's great.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm going to take it a little bit of a different direction. I think one of the best ADP values is actually Joe Mixon. I am kind of in on him this year. I'm not like going overboard with it, but I'm definitely keeping my eye out on Joe Mixon because he's RB14. He's shown that he has RB1 potential, so he can easily outperform that ADP. And as powerful of a passing offense as this will be, as explosive as it will be with CJ Stroud under center, they still want to run the ball in Houston. We're in the Shanahan, Sean McVay tree. That's still one of the key formulas is run the ball really well and then get some play action pass downfield. So I do want to still buy into that backfield. And I think Joe Mixon is a great candidate to outperform his ADP. But you already alluded to it, Matt. Who is the biggest trap in your mind?
I'm afraid of Nico Collins at wide receiver 11. I just am. There's too many good options, and now we've added Stephon Diggs to the mix here, and Joe Mixon, who he was my second pick for best person at ADP because I think he has the chance to again be a top 10 guy, a top 5 guy on this great offense. So I may look silly, right? Because the best guys become the best guys for a reason, but Collins only put it together once last year in terms of it's only been 1 year a sample size. There are so many other people like I right around that wide receiver 11 turn. There are just other people I feel more confident in having the upside for a top 10 year versus maybe I'm just too pessimistic, but I just see a lot of ways that this does not go as well for him this year.
Yeah, I see that. I honestly, it is hard for me to smash the button for him at his ADP. He is very high up there at times. I mean, you sometimes have to try and get him at the end of the first round if you are really going to go that route and guarantee that stack. So I haven't gotten as much Nico Collins here recently as I may have earlier in the year. But for me, the biggest trap is Zay Flowers, wide receiver 26 for the Baltimore Ravens. I just don't see it. I don't like paying the price. That's the biggest issue for me is I have to get Zay Flowers in the 4th round if I'm gonna get him. And I would much rather get a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce. Like I'd rather get one of those elite tight ends in the 4th round or an elite quarterback because you can get Josh Allen right in that range, Jalen Hurts in that range. So it was really hard for me to be excited about going after Zay Flowers, particularly when there's guys like George Pickens, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen. Like these are guys that are going after Zay Flowers in draft. So I think he's a bit of a trap at his current ADP. Okay, so what's our biggest question mark about this matchup? Biggest question mark.
Oh, there's so many different routes you can go. I guess I'll go with what do these defenses look like? Because the Texans defense has invested a lot of money in there. Their defensive line should be incredibly awesome. So did they make things difficult enough for Lamar that he can't distribute the ball? And then Baltimore Ravens have always had a great defense, right? So I don't care who you have as your starting quarterback. I've lived many years where I had one of the, if not the greatest quarterback in the league, and Tom Brady go up against a Ravens defense and they shut him down, right? So are these defenses what we think they will be? And are these offenses good enough to overcome it?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. For me, my biggest question is, will Derrick Henry pay off his ADP? Just will he be as utilized as everybody expects? The rumor for Henry to go to Baltimore started during the season last year before the trade deadline, and everybody was excited about it because we thought, oh, Derrick Henry's just going to cook with Lamar Jackson, and I think he could. I'm interested to see if it actually pans out that way. Like Lamar Jackson's also a really good passer of the ball, and so there's a part of me that's like, you don't want to only run the ball, right? You need to use him in the pass game as well. So I'm curious. His ADP is pretty high up. It's assuming that he's going to get a ton of carries, which he very well could. But I am going to be watching closely early in the season to see how that pans out. Now, some other teams to target. So the Baltimore Ravens play the New York Giants in week 15 and the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 16. The Houston Texans plays Miami in week 15 and the Kansas City Chiefs in week 16. If you have been following along with these episodes, you know that the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs play each other in week 17. We've talked about this before, but touch on it again. These four teams, they all play on the Saturday before Christmas, and then they swap around their matchups for Christmas Day. So they all have a 4-game break in between two games. That scares me a little bit for these matchups, but there is a clear way that you can get both week 16 and 17 correlation by pairing these teams together. So if we ignore some of the concerns around the short turnaround, maybe these teams all pop off and you get some natural correlation by targeting just 4 teams. So that will be all for this episode. Before you go, reminder to hit like and subscribe, turn on those notifications, and be on the lookout for our next episode where we'll be breaking down our 6th favorite Week 17 matchup. For Matt Record, I'm Austin Amendolia. This has been Summer School, and until next time, remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and best ball makes money. See you next time.